34 points paying races, and it all comes down to one final weekend here at Phoenix, where we will determine who the 4 championship contenders at Miami will be. And today, we're going to talk to one of those championship hopefuls right here on Out of the Groove. How's it going, y'all? My name is Eric, and welcome to Out of the Groove. Very special episode planned today. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Phoenix race coming up. We're going to look at the point standings here in just a moment. I'm going to talk about the 4 guys below the cut line, what I think they need to do to make up that incredible points deficit to get into the championship 4. And at the end of this episode, we're going to talk to one of those championship contenders. Denny Hamlin joins Out of the Groove for today's episode. But real quick, before we get to that interview, let's look at the championship grid going into Phoenix here. Just one race before the cutoff, and you see there a pretty big cushion for guys like Kyle Busch, Joey Logano. Denny Hamlin is 20 points out, a guy who's been a championship favorite, I think, for much of this season. After a rough race at Texas where he wrecked out early, he is now on the outside looking in, going to need quite the comeback performance here at Phoenix if he wants to make it to Homestead Miami. The only one of those drivers I would say is actually in a must-win is Chase Elliott, and I think it's mathematically proven he has to win this race. I don't think he can make up all 78 of those points in one race. That is not possible. But those other guys, 20, 23 points out, they're going to need to run really well in the stages. They're going to need to collect a lot of stage points. They're going to need guys like Logano and Kyle Busch to have some issues, maybe not collect stage points. If they do that, then they can still point their way in. That's definitely not unreasonable with the way stage racing is today. But I think the only guy who's in a must-win scenario for sure is Chase Elliott. But I'm sure Blaney, Larson, they might be looking at it the same way. Martin Truex Jr. with his win at Martinsville and Kevin Harvick with his win at Texas are the only 2 of those drivers locked in. Let's look at the other 6 and see who maybe is going to be faring the best going into this weekend at Phoenix. Who has the best history at ISM Raceway? Kyle Busch, will start with him. He obviously won this race earlier in the year. He won at Phoenix in March, so Joe Gibbs Racing dominated that race, as a matter of fact. Busch finished first. I think you had Truex and Hamlin both in the top 5 as well, so JGR was really fast at this track in the spring. I tend to think that's probably going to carry over to this race as well. So Kyle Busch plus 22, I think he's in a decent spot as long as he doesn't take himself out of the race somehow. Joey Logano finished 10th at this track in the spring, but that was his best finish at Phoenix since his win in 2016. He won a race here just 3 years ago, but since then, the 5 races since then, he only has 1 top 10, and it was that 10th place finish earlier this year. So Logano's recent history at Phoenix has been pretty shaky. I think a top 10, assuming Hamlin or whoever doesn't win, I think a top 10 would be enough to point his way into the playoffs, but if a guy like Hamlin or Elliott or Blaney wins, he's going to need more than that. And I don't know, Penske's been hit or miss with the speed. Logano only has 1 top 10 in these playoffs. Only 1 top 5, I should say. He has a couple top 10s. But Joey Logano, I don't know, he's in an interesting situation. Only plus 20, and he's the first guy out if Kyle Larson or Chase Elliott or one of those guys win. So Logano's going to be walking on eggshells this weekend. They can't have another catastrophic failure, which they've had a couple of those in these playoffs. Kyle Larson, I don't really think of him being great at a track like Phoenix, but his last 2 finishes at this track, 6th and 3rd. He was 6th here in the spring, so Kyle Larson maybe has more speed at this track than we originally thought. He did win at Dover early in these playoffs. That's a mile-long track, completely different from Phoenix in every sense of the word. It's concrete, different banking, everything, but at least they're both similar in that they're both 1-mile racetracks. Maybe that's a magic number for Kyle Larson, so don't sleep on Larson just yet. He is the only Chip Ganassi racing car still in these playoffs, so they might devote all their resources into that race car this week. Out of all these guys I just talked about, Denny Hamlin has the most career starts at Phoenix, so he's got experience to his credit, but he only has 1 win at Phoenix. It was back in 2012. He does have a very good average finish of 11.32 in his career at this racetrack, so that's not too bad, but he's been up and down at Phoenix in his career. I think he's going to be reliant on that Gibbs equipment this weekend. They were super fast here in the spring. Hamlin had a top 5 then. I think he's probably going to have a top 5 car again this weekend, and who knows, maybe he can make something happen. I know I was kind of hard on Hamlin when he wrecked at Texas and maybe ruined his best championship opportunity since 2010, but I do think he still has a great race car, and that team has been consistently probably the 2nd best Gibbs car this year. They got 5 wins as an organization. They won at Kansas a couple weeks ago. That team's still at the top of their game. He can definitely win this race on Sunday, so I would not count Denny Hamlin out. If he wins Phoenix, I think he goes on to win the whole thing. I think that momentum is just going to carry over, so watch out for that 11 team if they get hot on Sunday. Ryan Blaney finished 3rd here in the spring, actually won a stage as well. So Ryan Blaney had some speed here earlier this year. He has 3 career top 10s though in 7 Phoenix races, so his career numbers at this track are shaky, but he did run well here in the spring, so maybe he can pull some of that magic back out and put that forth this weekend. Now let's talk about Chase Elliott here. He is in a must-win scenario, needs to win this race. He has never won at Phoenix in his career, but he's had a couple really good runs in his career already. He's got an average finish of 10.14 in his handful of career starts, so that's really freaking good. But he's going to have to break through and get a win, and that's something he has not been able to do at this track yet in his young career. We'll see. Again, kind of like with Larson, Elliott is the only Hendrick car, so you'd hope that Rick Hendrick and Hendrick Motorsports would make sure he has the best possible equipment for this race. Hopefully they were saving something for this track, but we'll have to wait and see on that one. Chase Elliott's going to have some pressure. Anyway, there's just kind of brief run through of all the playoff drivers. I'll show you the point standings one more time. Yeah, not a super close gap. Guys like Hamlin, guys like Elliott, Larson, Blaney, got to be aggressive on Sunday if they're going to make something happen. But with that being said, let's talk directly to one of these championship contenders. Let's find out what's going through their heads here late in the season with just one race to go, one of the biggest, most pressure-filled races of the season. Let's talk to Denny Hamlin and see what he's feeling going into this race weekend at Phoenix. How's it going, everyone? Welcome to Out of the Groove. I have the great pleasure today of being joined by NASCAR Monster Energy Cup Series championship contender, Denny Hamlin. How's it going today, man? Thanks for joining me.
Doing good. Thanks for having me.
I want to start off, just talk about the playoffs because we have, I know, just 2 races to go. Phoenix is a huge race for you this season. You were my pick when the playoffs started to win this year's championship. I know you had one bad finish at Texas, got you in a little bit of a hole right now, but how are you feeling about your chances of kind of pulling yourself out of that and making the comeback at Phoenix this weekend?
Well, it's going to be difficult. It definitely will not be easy, but certainly believe that we're up for the task of it. ISM has really been a great track for us over the last few years, and even though we haven't gotten a win, we've battled for wins over there many times when it comes into the playoffs. So I'm confident when we go there, we're going to have a fast enough car. I'm confident I've got the right person on the pit box making the right calls. At this point, it's just up to me to go out there and get the job done this weekend.
For sure. So you're 20 points out right now. Do you go into this race kind of thinking points first, or is it just kind of throw it all on the line, must win?
No, it's going to be points first. I think that's the mentality we need to have is points first. If we can go out there and win the first stage, that ultimately starts to put pressure on others that have points that are above the cut line. So I think you got to go in there, try to win the first stage, and then kind of see how the race plays out from that point on. It just depends on where ultimately the 18 and the 22 finish in that first stage as to what we do with our strategy from there.
So you do have one career win at ISM Raceway, or Phoenix ISM, and I know you're pretty consistent there. What is the most challenging part of that racetrack?
Well, I think that trying to keep up with it is one of the hardest things. Obviously, with the big spoiler, it makes passing more difficult. So, this is going to be really one of the first races where we've seen the PJ1 being put down in the higher groove, and we've seen that that's been a factor in most of the races that it has been put down. So the challenge will be setting up your car to run in that, or you're going to be having it to set up to run down the bottom, and we're not sure which way will be the fastest until really we get in the race.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. So you revealed last week that you have a torn labrum in your shoulder. You're going to be requiring off-season shoulder surgery, but I was curious, how challenging is it to race with that injury? I know you've raced Texas last weekend. I don't know how long you've had it, but how challenging is that?
Well, it's actually pretty easy in the car. Luckily for me, it's on my left shoulder. So essentially, when you're driving, what it limits is basically my ability to get my arm over my head. But the good news is, being my left arm, I'm essentially just pulling down on the wheel with that side, and my right arm is the one that goes above the steering wheel. So as far as affecting me on the car, it really doesn't. And if anything, that's one of the good things about it being on that side.
I know Joe Gibbs Racing, they often are very big on teamwork. Teams work together. Even, like you said, when it was Furniture Row Racing, the affiliate team, you guys were still working, sharing notes pretty closely. But now it's late in the season. It's the home stretch. You still have 3 of you guys very much in contention for the championship. Does that change at all? Do you guys still share as many notes, as much information, or is it a little bit more every man for themselves once you get to this point in the year?
No, I mean, we continue to share. Nothing changes inside the walls, nothing that I'm aware of. The drivers are still open book. They give out any information that they can about their car during the race weekend, during the week. So nothing really changes from that aspect, and I haven't seen it in the 14 years I've been with the company.
Do you guys like that as drivers, that you kind of share all your information, or is there some of that type of stuff you guys wish you could kind of keep closer to your chest?
Well, I believe that you got to share it all, simply because if you do, and the other team puts it in their car and is successful with it, they then return the favor. And one example of that was Martinsville. The 19 was not very good in practice. Went out there and put most of the parts and pieces of my setup in. Went out there and won the race. So that shows good faith that they know that the information we gave is right and true. And then when the roles are reversed, we can do the same.
Yeah, well, it's worked out pretty well for Joe Gibbs Racing so far, I'd say. They've been pretty dominant the last several years. I know the focus is still on this year, but I want to look ahead to 2020 just a little bit. We've talked about alliances, teams, and stuff. You guys have a new one. I know Levine Family Racing is going to have a little bit closer technical alliance next year. What is Christopher Bell? What do you think Christopher Bell is going to be able to bring to the team next year? Because I think he's one of the more anticipated rookie drivers we're going to see in the sport the last several years.
Yeah, I mean, he's obviously got a ton of talent and doing really well in the Xfinity Series. As you move up to Cup, things definitely do become more difficult, but I think he's going to have all the parts and pieces he needs to be successful next year. He's going to have a great team over there. Obviously, you spoke about the alliance will grow. More information will be shared, and that's something that really they don't have a whole lot of right now. They get the cars and the parts and pieces, but they're kind of on their own to come up with their own setups and things like that. So I think it's certainly he'll reap the benefits of that, and really reap the benefits of having some great teammates within Joe Gibbs Racing to help fast forward any learning curve he might have in the Cup Series.
For sure, yeah. Very close-knit team over there. A lot of information being shared. That's why you guys have been so successful all these years. I have one other question. Again, kind of looking ahead to next year. I know Joe Gibbs Racing's made some big news the last week or so, announcing their Xfinity driver lineup, 3 full-time drivers next year. But I have to ask, I know the last couple of years, you've run an Xfinity race or so every year. Is there still room for that on your schedule next year? Is that something that you are still planning on running, some Xfinity next year?
Yeah, I'd like to. I certainly wouldn't mind expanding my schedule here and there. The last few years we've run just one race, but I'd love to run a couple more Xfinity races here and there, but certainly, like dedicating most of my weekends to just focusing on the Cup car and what we can do to make that whole FedEx team strong as we can. So we've had great success, and I do enjoy the races that I get to run, but Cup is definitely my number one focus.
For sure. Well, I know it'll be a big focus this weekend. Phoenix right around the corner, 2:30 Eastern time on NBCSN. Big weekend for you. I'll be rooting for you, man. Like I said, you were my championship pick. Don't make me look like a failure in front of my friends, man. I won't live it down.
All right, you got it.
Thanks, man. Well, there you have it. Thank you to Denny Hamlin for coming on and joining Out of the Groove for this episode. Really interesting to hear him talk a little bit about how the Joe Gibbs Racing drivers continue to share notes, how it's such a collaborative effort over there. That might speak volumes as to why that team has been so good. Obviously, they have good funding, good people, but the teamwork, I don't know. I don't feel like Hendrick. I don't feel like Stuart Haas. I just don't get the impression some of these other teams work as closely together with each other as Joe Gibbs drivers do with each other. So we'll see. Hopefully it pays dividends for him at Phoenix, because like I said, he is my championship pick. But anyway, thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember, you can follow me on Twitter, you can follow me on Instagram, and a big thank you to my Patreon supporters. Michael Harrison at you is the stars, Cameron James, John Koblenz, Jason R. Long, Isaac Dennison, Mika Suzuki, iFantasyRace.com, TheRacingInsiders.com, Matthew Koulopoulos, Pepe Lucius, Jeremy Conklin, Emilio Garcia, Joey DiMancino, Sky Racing Forum, Bryce Schumacher, Bryce Starcher, Scott McNew, Colton Austin, Bradley Pelletier, and the rest of these incredible Patreon supporters. I couldn't do the show without the support I get from every single one of you. Support from you guys helps me land bigger names, makes the show look more legit. That's how I'm able to get people like Denny Hamlin and hopefully some other big NASCAR names on the show sometime soon. It's because of support I get from you guys. So thanks for believing in me. Thanks for believing in the show. Hopefully we can continue to do some big things here over the next few months and into the next few years. Whew. Thank you guys for watching again. I might have another episode up before Phoenix. I had some scheduling things kind of go all over the place, so we'll see if I have another episode up before the race this weekend. If I do not, I will have an episode up immediately after the race on Sunday, so hope it's a good one. Hope you guys enjoy, and I will see you guys later this weekend probably. Have a good rest of your week, guys.